Hello friends, myself Professor V.D. Bhoknal, Associate Professor, Botany Department, KTHM College, Nasik. Now today's topic is biodiversity. Now biodiversity and its conservation methods. Now within biodiversity is the variety and differences among living organisms from all sources, including terrestrial, marine, and other aquatic ecosystems, and the ecological complexes of which they are a part. It is virtually synonymous with life on Earth. Biologists most often define biological diversity or biodiversity as the totality of genes, species, and the ecosystem of a region. The biodiversity found on Earth today consists of many millions of distinct biological species, which is the product of nearly 3.5 billions of years of evolution. Levels of biodiversity. First, genetic diversity. It is a levels of biodiversity that refers to the total number of genetic characteristics in the genetic makeup of the species. It is distinguished from genetic variability, which describe the tendency of genetic characteristic to vary. Species diversity. It refers to the variety of species within a region. Species diversity is an index that incorporates the number of species in an area and also their relative abundance. It is generally a much more useful value than species richness. Community and ecosystem diversity. Ecosystem diversity refers to the diversity of a place at the levels of ecosystem. This has three perspectives. First, alpha diversity. Within community diversity, alpha diversity refers to the diversity of organisms sharing the same community oblique habitat. Beta diversity. Between the community diversity, it refers to the diversity of organisms sharing to habitat. Gamma diversity. Diversity of the habitat over the total landscape or geographical area is called gamma diversity. Now see the Ceropegia. Now the Ceropegia variation among Nasik area. Now within this Ceropegia, in Marathi, Ceropegia, it is generally known as now the Kandil Phul, or it is also commonly known as Hamam Batata. Now in case of this Ceropegia, now this species Ceropegia vincifolia, Ceropegia bulbosa, which is commonly found at now the Indrai Fort nearby Chandwad area. Then now Ceropegia, now Levi, which is commonly found at now Anjaneri Hills. It is also found at now the Viswasgarh nearby Sinnar area. Then now these Ceropegia, now Mahabali, which is commonly found at Ramses Fort nearby Nasik area. Then Ceropegia vincifolia and Ceropegia bulbosa, which is also found at Pandavleni Hills. Then Ceropegia now Anjanerica, it is also found at now Anjaneri Hills nearby Trambakeshwar area. So it is the variation of Ceropegia within Nasik region. Then the plant diversity. Now different types of plants they are found in the different regions. Now first that is Mammicylon umbellatum. Now these Mammicylum umbellatum plant it generally show the blue color flowers, and this plant it is found at Mahabaleshwar hills. It is also found at now Ratangad area also. Then second plant now that is Malotus philippinensis. In Marathi it is generally known as now the kunku phal. Now from these red now the fruits kumkum is extracted. Now these plant it is generally found at now Kalsubai hills. It is also found at now these Ratangad, Harichandragad, etc. etc. Then the next now Elegans latifolia. Now Elegans latifolia, the leaves they generally show shining, silver shining, and this plant it is found at now the Ratangad area. Then fourth plant now that is Lasiosiphon ericoides. In Marathi it is generally known as now the Datpadi plant. It is commonly found at Mahabaleshwar now hills. It is also found at now Harichandragad area also. Next, seed bank. Now the first seed that is Tamarindus indicus. In Marathi it is generally known as now the chins. Then the next Adanthera pehonica. In Marathi it is generally known as now the Ratanguns. Then Cardiospermum helicacabum. In Marathi it is generally known as now Kapal Phodi. Then now the next that is Terminalia chebula. In Marathi it is generally known as now the Hirda. So these are the different types of now the seeds. Then the values of biodiversity. Now food. About 80% of edible plants and about 90% of present day food crops have been domesticated from wild. Drugs and medicine. About 70% of world population depends on plants or plant extract. Fuels. Forests have been used since ages for fuel wood. Fossil fuels are also product of biodiversity. Social value. Many of the plants like Tulsi, Lotus, Peepal, etc. are considered holy and sacred plant. Now, about 2.1 millions of species have been identified till date, while many more species are believed to exist. Now, according to UNEP, estimate approximately 9.252 millions of species exist on Earth. Then see next slide the birds diversity among Nasik area. Now within that now you see the first now the bird that is known as now the sunbird. Now this sunbird which is commonly found on now the Samanya Saman plant or rain tree, and now these sunbirds it collect now honeybee from the flowers, and during its visit it also pollinate now the different flowers. Then the second now that is commonly known as coppersmith. In Marathi it is generally known as tambat. Now here with the help of beak these coppersmith it make now the noise of now the tambat, and that's why this bird is commonly known as now the tambat bird. Then the next now the common maina in Marathi it is generally known as now the salunki. It is commonly found bird within Nasik area. Then the next and last now that is the kingfisher. Now this kingfisher which is now sitting on wires. Now the kingfisher, it generally show the now color variation, that is blue and now this greenish color. In Marathi, it is generally known as now the Khandya birds. So it is the bird variation among Nasik area. Then threats to biodiversity. Extinction is a natural event, and from a geological perspective routing. In the last century, human impact has been so severe that thousands of species and varieties are becoming extinct annually. Some of the main causes are habitat loss, degradation, fragmentation. Habitat loss and degradations are major causes of species extinction, affecting 89% of all threatened birds, 83% of mammals, and 91% of all threatened plants now assessed globally. The main causes of habitat are agriculture activities, mining, developmental of human settlement, industry, etc. etc. Now, the poaching of wildlife. Poaching is another now the threat that has emerged in recent decades as one of the now primary reason for decline in number of species. Wildlife is sold and traded in many countries for live specimens. Now the folk medicine, then now the fur, skin, and other products such as ivory, then horns, etc. Now amounting to millions of dollars. Next, man wildlife, now the conflicts. The conflicts between man and wildlife started with the evolution of man, but intensity increased due to the activities of modern man. Due to the lack of staple now food and now the disruption of movement, wild animals now came out of forest area and attacked the agriculture field, and humans and in turns got killed by humans. Introduction of exotic species, organisms introduced into habitat where they are not native are termed as exotic plant. They can be thought of as biological pollutant and are considered to be among the most damaging agents of habitat alteration and degradation in the world. Next, climatic change or climate change. A changing global climate now threatens species and ecosystem. The distribution of species is largely determined by climate. Climate change may simply shift this distribution, but for number of reasons, plants and animals may not able to adjust within the climatic change. Conservation of biodiversity. The Convention on Biological Diversity, held in June 1992, now stressed the need of conservation of biodiversity for sustainable development and now the perpetuation of human being on earth. Conservation is defined as the management of human use of the biosphere so that it may yield the greatest sustainable benefit to the present generation while maintaining its potential to meet the needs and now aspiration of the future generation. The two basic approaches to wildlife conservation is protected habitats are now the first in situ conservation and second ex situ conservation. Now, in situ conservation, it is simply means conservation of species in its natural ecosystem or even in man-made ecosystem. This strategy emphasizes protection of total ecosystem throughout the network of protected area. Protected area, an area of land and area or sea specially now dedicated to the protection and maintenance of biological diversity and now the managed throughout legal effective means. There are different categories of protected areas which are now the managed with the different objective. These include now the biosphere reserves, national parks, then wildlife now sanctuaries, etc. Now at present we have 11 major biosphere reserves and now 80 national park, then 420 wildlife sanctuaries in our country. Examples of biosphere reserves of India. Now that is Nilgiri, Nandadevi, Manas, Gulf of Manyar, Great Nicobar Islands, Panchamari, etc. Examples of some national park in India. Now the Kaziranga, Gir National Park, Periyar, then now the Sariska. Then the example of some wildlife sanctuaries of India. Now the Ghana Bird Sanctuary, Hazaribagh Sanctuary, then Abohar Wildlife Sanctuary, then Jaladappara Wildlife Sanctuary, then now Mudamalai Wildlife Sanctuary, etc. Ex-situ conservation. It is defined as the conservation of component of biological diversity. Sample of genetic diversity, particularly of endangered species outside their natural habitat. It involves maintenance and breeding of endangered plant and animal species under partially or wholly controlled conditions. Example: zoos, botanical gardens, aquaria, nursery, then DNA banks, seed bank, gene bank, etc. There are more than 1,500 botanical gardens in the world containing more than now 18,000 species. There are more than now 800 now zoos around the world with about now 3,000 species of mammals, birds, reptiles and amphibians. Thank you.